So next we have shoeing and dragging. So what ends up happening is, as you can imagine, dragging is this. I'll say the definition in a second. So as you can imagine, it wears off sort of the front part of the hoof. So what is dragging? It's the abrasion of the hoof or horseshoe in the front area because of diseases of the nerves, tendons, joints like the knee and tarsal in particular, limb bones, and it's usually in the hind limbs. So dragging horses, they're shoed with a wide hinged horseshoe, so very wide shoe. And you have a thick hooked front part. This is the tongue, and it's forged on the horseshoe itself, so it will go over this front part that's being dragged. And on top of this horseshoes are fitted with a steel slate or a high hooked tongue. So I think it's referring to this, but I don't know if this is related. So when we're shoeing for limb diseases as well, so orthopedic shoeing is something that's used in these cases, and it regulates the load and allows movement by applying high studded horseshoes and thickening branches or inserting pads between the horseshoe and the hoof. And you can also add additional tongues, splints between the horseshoes and higher limb parts and others. So it's talking about you can add extra things like this and this. We'll go into it. So it's talking about different diseases now. So when we talk about chronic inflammation of the pastern joint, the hoof is adjusted to restore its proper shape. So the horseshoe is round with thicker, wider and longer branches or studs. But if we have digital flexor tendons and they're inflamed, the toe part is trimmed. So just imagine this part is trimmed more, and you have a light horseshoe with medium, high and wide studs. So it's light in weight, I think, and you have a smooth slipper horseshoe that can also be fitted. I think this is the slipper horseshoe. I've just been pointing to it a lot because you can't see the bottom here. Yeah, and it has a transverse rubber pad that plays the role of the studs. Next, you have chronic inflammation of the tarsal joint. So before, don't get it confused with the pastern joint. And if you're not sure about the joints, just go through the first practical again, or Google it, because I'm not sure I explained them well. So with inflammation of the tarsal joint, which is also known as osteoarthritis, what you get is dragging of the hoof. So you can imagine what kind of shoe we might need actually, other than me showing you the picture. So what happens is the hoof becomes dull with a convex engaging wall. I don't know what that means, and it's wiped out by constant dragging at the bottom and the stepping edge. So the horseshoe has a thicker toe part. As you can see, this toe part's actually higher than the heel part, and it's curved upwards to the wall, so you have a hooked tongue and longer branches curved back with high studs. So the studs will be high too, and when the toe part of the hoof is affected, the weight should be transferred to the heels. Then a smooth horseshoe without stud. Then you can use a smooth horseshoe without studs and thinner branches. So none of these are a good example, but yeah, you without these and thinner branches after this initial shoeing. If we have laminitis, which is I think in the first lecture, we talk about heart-shaped ones, but we're going to go more into it. So the main problem with laminitis is the rotation of P3, so phalanx 3. This is the very end. When we look into an x-ray, this is the final bone in the hoof. And the purpose of the orthopedic shoeing is to prevent this bone from getting lower or rotating by maintaining the hoof bone. And the horseshoeing begins with trimming the hoof to the correct shape. You keep the heels in place, and in other parts of the horn, only the old one is removed, and you need temporary support for the frog. So this is the temporary support. Before you add the horseshoe, by adding a gauze bandage. And another method is to apply a heart-shaped horseshoe, and horseshoes should be with should have larger branches basically. And after you apply the therapeutic treatment, the hoof bone will continue to rotate sometimes. So as a last resort, you can do a tenotomy of the deep flexor tendon. So basically cut the deep flexor tendon if the shoeing doesn't work, but that's usually the first option. Now with navicular disease, which is actually in the second lecture, the orthopedic shoeing, the goal is to restore and maintain the proportionality of the hoof and the normal angle of the hoof wall. So the hoof wall, as you can see here, it's like massive. it looks like this horse has never seen a farrier in its life, and the heels need to be raised as much as possible. I don't know if this is okay. And especially in animals with low and indented heels. So, okay, imagine if this didn't exist though, the heel would be like this. The horseshoe is closed. Yeah, and the reason for this is because the navicular bone is here, so you want to reduce the load there by elevating the heel, so more of the pressure is at the front. So anyway, the horseshoe is closed, and in the cases of horses with narrow and upright hooves, the branches are forged outward to stimulate the extension of the hoof. So when we have deformed horses, and I think this is in lecture 3, this is when, say, the legs go too far in, too far out, maybe the toes go too far in or too far out, so it's either about the legs or toes. So you use something called a flat step surface. I think let's start here. So if the step surface is flat, you have a flat and thin body of the sole without indents, and even the step edge is quite flat as well. The frog is very developed, so you can't see it, but you have to trust me. It's wide and it sometimes exceeds the stepping edge, so basically the frog might actually come out of the sole. So with horseshoeing, for cracked horns, or if what you do for cracked horns is you remove the horn by trimming, then you have the step edge and the white line, if they're the only ones that are smooth. Sorry, you only smooth them out, so let me just repeat, because yeah, I'm really tired. So the cracked horn, you remove it by trimming, and the step edge and the white line, they're the only things that are smoothed out so the horseshoe can fit, and you protect the slim foot from being injured, and that's what the horseshoe does. That's why the toes and the sides are much wider and deeper, and a closed horseshoe is carried out to just carry some weight on the frog, basically. Or even here, this is also closed, because yeah, as I said, the frog can like end up being overgrown and come out of the sole. And yeah, I'll stop after this. So you have a full surface foot hoof. I don't know what that means, sorry. So basically, it says a high stage on the flat hoof, and here the foot extends the foot edge of the wall and has a convex shape. So I guess it's saying it has a convex, the hoof itself has a convex shape. So if we're talking about horseshoeing or horseshoeing, it's you basically trim and shoe the flat hoof, and the best horseshoe is usually the closed one, like this, with a wide toe part and a deep inner part, and you always put leather between the horseshoe and the foot. The horseshoe is fixed to the hoof with smaller nails, and when the white line is destroyed, you have lateral tongues which are inserted to prevent the horns from breaking. And we'll stop here and we'll carry on afterwards.